So this video gives us the last two requirements of the problem, which are to prepare the retained earnings statement and the stockholders' equity section of the balance sheet for all the transactions that we just spent a whole bunch of time working through. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. You can see I've got a template for a retained earnings statement, and this kind of kick the cobwebs out of your brain a little bit. Go back to some of the earlier accounting material you learned back in Accounting 201, or whatever course it was you took, to remember what a retained earnings statement is and what it even does. Remember, that's created after we create the income statement, because it's meant to show us as the owner how much of the profit is being retained. Where did it go? How much profit was there that increased my retained earnings, and subsequently some things come out of there. And so we start with the retained earnings balance at the beginning of the year, and the place you get that is from, if we go back to the T accounts we created, retained earnings was 7.1 million at the beginning of the year. So that's the account balance given in the problem. So $7,100,000 was given to us as a beginning balance. And we next need to figure out what was the net income that increased this retained earnings. So the net income that we earned in 2016, and this problem doesn't tell us a whole lot about that. We don't know the detail in terms of what the net income was, but we were told how much it was when we were told to post the amount of the income summary account to retained earnings. So this 485,000 that we subsequently put into retained earnings right here increased retained earnings. That's net profit. So net profit from the current year dumped into the retained earnings bucket, making it larger by 485, and that's what we're showing right here, is that we should add 485,000 to the retained earnings for the year. But things also draw down retained earnings, and those are, of course, the dividends, both the stock dividends and the cash dividends. So we'd have to go back again to our account balance, or the amounts that we pulled out of retained earnings relative to the dividend account, and that was this amount here, this 325,600. And that was a combination of both the stock dividend account being closed to retained earnings and the cash dividend account being closed to retained earnings, which you can't see here. So the total of 325,600 goes over here, and we have a negative amount, 325,600. That's actually reducing retained earnings. So in net difference between the two, we actually increased retained earnings by 159,400. So although we had a profit of 485, we decided to distribute 325,600. So the ending retaining earnings balance is what we started with, plus the net income minus the dividends, to give us an ending retained earnings of 7,259,400. Now that's an important number because that flows through directly to the balance sheet. And so the balance sheet I've got kind of listed here for us, again, is only a partial balance sheet. It's the stockholders' equity section of the balance sheet, and I could even take this retained earnings amount, the 7,259,400, and I know that's going to show up here. I can plug it right down there. That's the ending balance and retained earnings at the end of the year. So, good stockholders' equity section of the balance sheet starts with paid-in capital, and these kind of bring your brain back to the illustration in class with the big ring, the orange ring of equity. This is all of the equity, and we said there are buckets in there. There's paid-in capital, and there's retained earnings. So we've got the retained earnings balance, but within paid-in capital, we talked then there are additional accounts listed in there, and we first start with the common stock since there's no preferred stock here. And so we actually do need to list and let the shareholders know what's the stated or par value, how many shares have been authorized, issued, and outstanding. And this you can get right off of the problem, right? 600,000 right here were authorized. We initially issued 400,000, but remember, this is kind of like the odometer in your car. As you issue more, it keeps increasing, and since this 400,000, subsequently more were issued or given out sold to shareholders. And so how did I get the 468,000? Oh, you kind of got to go back into the conversation that we had. I don't even know if I have it here. Let me just look here. I think I've got it. I thought I had it somewhere. Hold on a second. Well, I just made a little list here so we could see where I got the 458 and the 468, and you can go back through the journal entries we worked through at the beginning of the problem to see where I got these numbers. So we started the year with 400,000 shares issued, but we had 30,000 shares in the treasury, so there were only 370 outstanding. We subsequently issued 50,000, sold the treasury shares of 30,000, so those get added back. And we subsequently bought more treasury shares, another 10,000 come out, and then we issued the stock dividend amount. So this number here represents, if I add them all up, these are the number of shares outstanding, because remember, outstanding is issued minus treasury stock. And so issued so that there are 10,000 shares of treasury stock outstanding. Maybe wrong word to use, not outstanding, but that we hold, that we currently have, 10,000 shares we have, which means that there are 468,000. If I add those 10,000 shares back, that's issued. So outstanding equals issued minus treasury shares. So issued is like a running total of how many we've ever sold or issued, and that's 468. We now have 10,000 that we have in the treasury, so it's 458 outstanding. So I got those two numbers. So anyhow, we're looking for a dollar amount here, and that dollar amount comes right from the T account. So if you go over to our T account for the common stock, you'd have to add all three of these up, and your accounting system would do this for you. You'd have 3.744 million in common stock. So 3.744 million in common stock. Then we have some paid in capital. So paid in capital in excess of the stated value. Again, I can go right over and build a formula to pull the balance that was in this paid in capital in excess of the stated value. All three of those added together gives me 890. And then I'm actually going to move this over here. And so we had this from sale of treasury stock. That's additional paid in capital was considered. That's when we sold the treasury stock and actually kind of profited from it. So that $60,000 shows up here. It's a positive amount. And so the total between the two of the additional paid in capital is 950. So we had the total paid in capital is the common stock plus the amount in excess of stated. So 4.6 whatever million. And here's my retained earnings. So my total paid in capital and retained earnings is this amount plus this amount. And then I have to subtract the treasury stock. So the balance of the treasury stock. If I can fit it on the screen here, probably not. There it is. So the balance in the treasury stock account is 100,000. So 100,000. Remember, that's a contra equity account. So the total stockholders' equity is this and this combined, 11.853 million. And hopefully now, we've ended this chapter. You have an appreciation for what that means. I would want to know, well, how much of that did I actually pay in? That's this amount. And how much was the result of profits less any distributions? So 7.2 million, fairly significant. And we have some shares still outstanding, treasury shares that we hold on to, so that reduces equity. So I hope that gives you a good appreciation for how all of this stuff kind of flows. The income goes as part of the retained earnings statement. This ending retained earnings flows through to the balance sheet, and now we've learned a lot more detailed stuff about what makes up the equity section of the balance sheet.